Welcome into the Dallas Cowboys Report, presented today by Manscaped. They're also making smooth sack summer possible this year, and they're saving you a ton of money on their top-of-the-line men's grooming products when you use promo code COWBOYS over at manscaped.com. Tell you all about them later on in today's show. But we've got the news and replacements to discuss as promised here. James Washington, we've got the injury news. Not good on that front. We'll also look at some internal options to replace him, as it's James Washington replacements after all. Some free agents to potentially consider, and some top trade targets the Cowboys could also go look at in terms of replacing a guy that was being counted on to play a somewhat key role for the Cowboys wide receiver core. Washington, as I'm sure we mostly know by now, suffered a Jones fracture in his foot during Monday's practice. Dez Bryant had that a few years ago. Tank Lawrence had it last year, cost him about 10 weeks, 10 games there. The expectation early on is Washington will miss somewhere between 6 to 10 weeks, probably a bit closer to the 10-week timeline there. And that means he will likely start the year on injured reserve. And that's unfortunate because the return of James Washington will be very similar to the return, hopefully, of Michael Gallup, which defeats the whole purpose of having him on the team. He was going to be your short-term Gallup replacement. The Cowboys are precariously thin right now in terms of proven talent at wide receiver. Here are the career catches, NFL, of healthy receivers on the roster. CeeDee Lamb has 153. Noah Brown has 39. Everyone else has 0. So I would hope the Cowboys strongly consider at least looking at other wide receiver options. But do you think they will go that route? We know how the Cowboys like to operate. Get your predictions in for me right now. 1 for yes, 0 for no. And, of course, if the Cowboys do sign a receiver, we'll break it down, just like we did with the Kevontae Turpin signing, Malik Jefferson signing, and all the other moves. Remember, we had our Turpin video out before others claimed to break the news. So hit that big red button and subscribe. Looking internally to start here. Oh, boy. Right now, your starters would be CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Tolbert, and Noah Brown. There's obviously some hype around TJ Vasher, Simi Fehoko. I'll make note that Dennis Houston has been running with the ones at training camp, but I haven't heard good reports back in terms of how well he's actually played. Kevontae Turpin can maybe step up. Dontario Drummond's on the PUP list, by the way. You're thin at receiver. Now, I think the hope internally maybe rides, at least for some of us, on TJ Vasher. He has unquestionably been among the early winners so far from Cowboys training camp. And although I am optimistic and hopeful about him, this is also important to make note. He is an undrafted free agent with 0 career catches and 0 career actual NFL game reps. You don't want to necessarily only bank on him, because if we look back and go, oh, Vasher's enough, and then we get to week 5, we're like, wow, shocker, the UDFA wasn't good enough. And that is why you got to look at other options here. Noah Brown is your most experienced one, but a lot of these guys on this depth chart, from Noah Brown to TJ Vasher to even Kevontae Turpin as a more special teamer, I think, early on, I feel great if those guys are your wide receiver 5, or even maybe your 4 on the low end. Talking about them being a 3, being a borderline starter, I'm worried about that. I'm hopeful that the best, step-up moment is going to come from Simi Fehoko. 5th-round pick I liked a lot out of Stanford. Didn't play at all last year in terms of actual offensive snaps. So I do think this team needs to look outside the wide receiver room to both free agent targets, trades, but maybe you see more Tony Pollard usage here. Now, I think that the biggest loss of Washington is going to be felt as a vertical deep threat. Why not play more Tony Pollard? Why not live in 21 personnel with Pollard and Zeke and Dalton Schultz and CeeDee Lamb and Tolbert? Those are your 5 best playmakers right now on offense. So maybe you believe in this Cowboys wide receiver core right now with all the unprovenness. That's fine. This is a democracy after all here at the Cowboys Report. So do you think the Cowboys should get another wide receiver? Y for yes or N for no. We're going to break down some free agent trade targets here coming up in a second. But if you get the ad break on YouTube, while the ad plays, head down there, type in Y for yes or N for no. We're going to begin with free agency targets. That's T.Y. Hilton to get things going here. Now, Hilton had been linked to Dallas. There was the Pat McAfee report that was really just him misreading the headline, and it got spun up there. Hilton's old. He has not been healthy in recent years, and the 2018 version is not the guy you're going to get. And I'll make note just overall right now, every single player that we are discussing, free agency, trade, they've all got something negative about them. It could be age and less production. That's the case for T.Y. Hilton. But there is a reason why they could potentially be available in almost all cases. We mentioned injury. That is the Odell Beckham situation. And I'm down to keep Odell Beckham watch on for the Cowboys, depending on how Tolbert plays this year. But it doesn't make any sense right this second. It doesn't help you. You don't need another currently injured wide receiver. Odell Beckham is the best player on the free agent market by a massive margin. But he's not going to be healthy until after Gallup and Washington get back. OBJ's not going to be cleared until November-ish, maybe late October. By then, you've got Lamb, who's having a great camp so far. You're hoping for a big-time performance out of Jalen Tolbert. You'll have Gallup and Washington back. So unless there's another injury, Beckham doesn't actually help you at all right now, and that's what the Cowboys need, help to get you through the first month or so of the season. I'm looking for vertical threats. I mentioned that, and Deshaun Jackson unquestionably fits that mold. Now, Jackson, a longtime Cowboys killer, has also been a bit of a head case. He could have won a title with the Rams if he didn't force his way off the organization. That was kind of crazy there. He, of course, helped torch the Cowboys on the Thanksgiving Day penalty fest. He's also not what he was in his prime, and his numbers have very much dipped. He can still be a inconsistent vertical threat, but I do wonder just how many more chances Deshaun Jackson has in the NFL. Just not the same player he was really in his prime. More free agent targets coming up here in a second, but first it is Smooth Sack Summer, and Manscaped's making sure you have a ball this season off the field. Try out their Ultra Smooth package. They've got the Crop Shaver Razor, Crop Exfoliator, Crop Gel. You don't have to borrow a potential, maybe your girl's razor or whatever, to keep things nice and smooth down there. Try out the Ultra Smooth package at manscaped.com, promo code Cowboys. Use the exfoliator, use the gel, and then shave to help avoid nicks at the area you really, really don't want to have a nick or a cut. Promo code Cowboys at manscaped.com gets you 20% off and free shipping. Let's go to Emmanuel Sanders. Shout out friend of the show, Jane Slater, who says that Sanders has a knee issue at the moment. That's a big factor in why he apparently doesn't have that much interest as we sit. Cole Beasley is next up here. The two names that I think maybe are the most logical connections to the Cowboys here. Beasley is a former Cowboy himself. He said he wants to play with Dak Prescott. He also doesn't really fill the hole where you could, in terms of, I know, it sounded dirty. It doesn't really fill the hole in terms of your roster. You want a vertical threat. Beasley is not a vertical threat anymore. 8.5 yards per catch is some of the lowest you'll see among an actual wide receiver. He's a slot-only option. I would rather look for speed for this Cowboys team as my short-term replacement for Washington, who was already my short-term replacement for Michael Gallup. The name that makes the most sense to me, and I know there are obvious injury concerns, I get all of that, is one William Fuller. The former Dolphin, former Texans wide receiver does apparently have interest, although that was more or less sent out by his agent. But Fuller would be a strong fit for what the Cowboys lack right now. Big play threat on the outside. When healthy, and that is a all caps when/if, he's a home run threat. There was the PED suspension last year. He was not remotely healthy at all in 2021. There was a lot of weird stuff going on. He did not make any real impact. Fuller is my number one target of the free agent options out there. He's got the pure talent ability, former first-round pick, and the speed this team doesn't truly have on the outside. Yeah, you got Pollard and Turpin as some speedy guys, but Fuller would bring you a vertical threat that I don't think the roster has at the current moment. Before we get to our trade ideas and some names that no, you should not want, I want you guys to name a player who you want to add. It could be via trade, could be via free agency, it could even just be on the roster. You don't need, maybe you fully believe in someone like TJ Vasher. But drop the name you want to add in the comment section. All right, trade targets. And this one is maybe more intriguing or at least sexier. Darius Slayton, the Giants wide receiver, who I do believe is very much on the trade market, would cost you roughly $2.5 million, so very affordable there. He struggled last year because Daniel Jones and Mike Glennon are bad, but he's also a pure vertical threat. He fits the mold of what I'm looking for right now. This is one of my preferred trade targets. I don't think he'd be that expensive. It'd be a one-year rental. You can move on after the year, and he'd give you some speed that, again, you don't have right now on the team. All right, let's talk some previous high draft picks. Denzel Mims, the Jets receiver who I loved coming out of Baylor. I don't think he's been used properly by the New York Jets. I think he needs a change of scenery. Maybe that could come in Dallas. Maybe Denzel Mims returning to the state of Texas would be exactly what he needs to kind of right the ship a little bit in terms of a very disappointing start so far. But he's got the profile of an outside threat, right? He's 6'3", 207, ran a 4.38 at the combine. That's my type of guy. Laviska Shenault is next up here, and this is a name that many of you have asked about in the past. I have red flags. He couldn't catch last year. I know the fantasy people say, oh, you got to get Shenault the ball. And I'm like, sure, you tried last year, Jacksonville did, and he couldn't catch it. His numbers went significantly down. I don't like him as a vertical threat. If you want to try to make him your slot receiver, we could have that conversation, but I have been very underwhelmed and frankly disappointed so far out of the career from Laviska Shenault. So if we're going outside the organization, how should the Cowboys address the wide receiver room? Type F for free agent, or you can type in T for trade. Jalen Reagor next up here, who the Eagles have said, yeah, he's fighting for a spot, which is true, but his contract is not indicative of a player who can be cut. The Eagles eat too much dead money if they cut him. He would be available, though, potentially, via a trade. Now, Reagor's been a disappointment. We all know that he has not lived up to expectations, and there's a reason why the Eagles went out and traded for A.J. Brown. They drafted Devonta Smith. But I think a change of scenery, coming back home to Texas, could be good for Reagor. Now, Reagor and Kevontae Turpin might fill a bit of a similar role on special teams. That's the balance you throw off here, but you got to figure out the actual receiver room first, more so than punt returner at this point. One more name is Preston Williams, who I do think is going to be available, potentially at least, from the Miami Dolphins. He's kind of fallen out of favor. They have Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Cowboys legend Cedric Wilson. They also signed Mohamed Sanu. They draft Eric Ezekam, another Texas boy, in the 4th round. I think Williams on the outside looking in, and he brings you some nice size, and that kind of fits the TJ Vasher standpoint a little bit there. 6'5", 224. He's not the same burner as other guys are on this team, but the size makes him a potential vertical threat from that standpoint. So kind of like that idea as it relates to one Preston Williams. Now for our next trade target, I'm cheating. I've got 3 of them, and it's all about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and that wide receiver room, because nobody has better depth and talent in the NFL at wide receiver than Tampa Bay. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Julio Jones. I know I said receiver. I don't know why I did that. Russell Gage, Jalen Darden, Rashad Perryman, Tyler Johnson, Scotty Miller, Cowboys legend Cyril Grayson. Hell, Vincent Smith has made NFL rosters before. They legitimately go 10 deep. They ain't keeping all 10 guys. 3 names I would consider. Jalen Darden, who I love, and I would want the Cowboys to take him. I'd be all for a 5th-round pick for him right now. Let's ride. Tyler Johnson has been more productive of these 2 guys last year. Maybe not the best vertical threat, though. Scotty Miller's kind of now last on my list because, well, he's a slot-only receiver. Let's talk about the big names now. Dionate Johnson. He could maybe be available. The issue that the Steelers run into and the Cowboys run into is he's going to be expensive. He wants a giant new contract. If you trade for him, you're probably moving at least a 3rd or more likely a 2nd-round pick. Do you want to pay him $20 million? That's the baseline for a Dionate Johnson deal. That's not even top 10 wide receiver money anymore. So if you want Johnson long-term, you got to pay him $20 million. And oh, by the way, CeeDee Lamb's due for a new deal next year. Do you want to pay him $25 million or more? That's $45 million plus Michael Gallup. So Johnson, I think, only makes sense as a rental, and I'm not sure that's a route the Cowboys want to go. If you want to trade for a big name, it's Tyler Lockett. Lockett would be an awesome addition for the Dallas Cowboys. There are two issues, though, here. Premium draft pick. I'm thinking second, third round pick if you are lucky to acquire Tyler Lockett. You have CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. The Cowboys might view Lockett as a progress blocker for Jalen Tolbert, but he's pretty affordable. 4 years, $46.5 million. Very team-friendly from that standpoint. But Lockett is more of a short-term and long-term fix, and I wonder if the Cowboys are so convinced long-term of Lamb, Gallup, and Tolbert that they only want a short-term fix. Now, before we go, and some of y'all will get mad at me, it's fine, but I'm right. No, do not sign Antonio Brown. Do not sign Dez Bryant. The next contract Dez Bryant should be a one-day deal to retire as a Cowboys member, and then we put him in the Ring of Honor later on. I'm sorry. I know Dez is a fan favorite. I loved him. I never thought the Cowboys should have dumped him. Move on. He's washed. I am sorry. Antonio Brown is not worth it. He's talented. He's a head case. I do not trust him to not cause issues at some point. And apparently he's a rapper now too because, that's how it tends to go once you're cooked in the NFL. Now, if you made it to the end of today's video, it means you're a real one. You're part of the squad here at the Cowboys Report. You'll watch our shows all the way through to the end. So type real one for me in the comment section.